I mean, you guys at breakneck speed found this guy, you identified him, you profiled the type of person that he would be, and that's incredible. Is there more evidence that you guys can offer to people, maybe video from that roof? Do you expect that there will be more to be released?
I think the best thing we can do for Charlie, especially me as FBI director and our team, is to prosecute this case in the courts of law, where it is, in Utah, in the state of court of law. And what we're going to do is what we've done. Give them every piece of evidence we collect. Our cellular analysis systems are the best in the world, and that's what the FBI does, and that's what we flew in and did. That's how we led the manhunt and got him in 33 short hours. And every single piece of video or forensic evidence or witness interview, we've done dozens and dozens, gone on these platforms, found every single person. All of that material, and I know this is frustrating to the public, and I understand it, but I'm not going to allow the Charlie Kirk prosecution to be dismantled because we want to get over our skis and publicize information. That is the one thing you cannot do. We will make everything public in court. It just takes time.
It does. Yeah, it always does in these cases. Is there any possibility that other people were involved? When you talked at the White House, I sort of got a little inkling that maybe you're looking at other people.
We're looking at everyone that was there, that was online, and we're looking to refer these matters to the state prosecution authorities when there's enough evidence. But the reality is, again, with social media, when you have hysterical conspiracy theories filling the void, you're harming Charlie and his family and a rightful prosecution of his alleged assassin, who we have in custody, and rightly so, in my opinion. And if anyone helped him, do you think that we at this FBI are literally going to let them get away with it? Us standing silent in the face of growing conspiracy theories, that's what we do to shut down a faulty prosecution. That's what we do to shut down a system of justice that wants to be exploited by these same anarchists. And that's what they're doing. They're bringing it to social media. They're bringing it online for clickbait, and we're not going to take it. We don't care what you say about me or Dan Bongino.
The air in Phoenix was thick, heavy with the dry heat of the desert and the charged anticipation of a political rally. On stage, Charlie Kirk, a figure who commands both fervent admiration and intense criticism, was in his element. His voice, amplified across the sun-baked plaza, was met with a familiar wave of applause and cheers. Then, in a span of time too brief to measure with a heartbeat, the soundtrack of democracy was violently rewritten. It was not a firework. It was not a car backfiring. It was a sharp, percussive crack that tore through the crowd, a sound that instantly vaporized normalcy and replaced it with primal fear. What followed was a silence, somehow more deafening than the shot itself, a vacuum of sound that was immediately filled by a surge of chaos, screams, shouts, the frantic movement of bodies, and the swift, dark-clad swarm of security converging on the stage. This was the birth of a national nightmare, captured in jagged high definition on 100 shaky cell phones. In those first blurred hours, a nation held its breath, tethered to news cycles spinning in a vortex of speculation and dread. The initial relief, when it came, was delivered from the highest possible authority. FBI Director Kash Patel stood before a forest of microphones, his face a carefully composed mask of grim resolve. He looked like a man in control, a steady hand in a suddenly unsteady world. His words were designed to soothe a terrified public. We have a suspect in custody. The individual believed to be responsible for this heinous act is no longer a threat. For a few precious hours, the narrative held. Justice, it seemed, had been swift and decisive. Less than 12 hours later, an official correction, cold and bureaucratic, was issued. The director's statement had been premature. No suspect was, in fact, in custody. The investigation was ongoing. This was not merely a minor adjustment of the facts. It was a seismic event that created a fissure in the foundation of public trust. The first crack had appeared, and into it poured a deluge of doubt. In the digital age, such cracks do not remain simple fractures. They are flooded with the harsh light of a billion screens, examined, amplified, and weaponized. The void left by official silence became a breeding ground for speculation. Was the director's error a simple, catastrophic mistake in the fog of a crisis? Or was it something more sinister, a deliberate false flag, an orchestrated narrative designed to manipulate the public? The very institution tasked with uncovering the truth had, in its first act, become the subject of the investigation. Days bled into one another, each marked by a tense, formal silence from the FBI. The standard operational procedure of tight-lipped investigation felt, in this superheated atmosphere, like an admission of guilt. The silence was finally broken not with a press conference, but with a terse, unemotional press release. A name was given to the ghost, Tyler Robinson, a 24-year-old from a quiet suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. He was not a foreign agent, not a known extremist with a dossier. His arrest was as quiet and unceremonious as the event he was accused of was public and chaotic. There was no dramatic shootout, no defiant speech to the cameras. Just a young man in handcuffs, his face a blank, unreadable slate upon which a terrified and furious nation would project its deepest anxieties. The evidence, as it was meticulously drip-fed to a ravenous media corps, felt simultaneously overwhelming and curiously sterile. Sources close to the investigation revealed that DNA evidence, collected from a specific vantage point, placed Robinson at the scene. Forensic analysis of the bullet's trajectory allegedly confirmed his position as the shooter. This was science, the bedrock of modern justice, presented as unimpeachable. Yet, the questions sprouted like weeds through concrete. In the chaotic aftermath of the shooting, could the crime scene have been preserved with perfect integrity? How was the DNA analysis completed with such astonishing speed? The seeds of doubt, planted by the director's initial misstatement, were now taking root. Then came the first piece of tangible cinematic evidence, leaked to a hungry press. A note. The report was like something from a political thriller. Investigators, sifting through the charred remains of a trash-can fire behind Robinson's apartment complex, had discovered a single, partially burned slip of paper. Through painstaking physical reconstruction and advanced digital imaging, the FBI's lab technicians had supposedly revealed 4 words, scrawled in a frantic hand. "Take out Charlie Kirk." It was a smoking gun, reduced to ashes and then digitally resurrected. But to a public now conditioned for suspicion, it felt too convenient, too theatrical. The phrasing was stark and direct, like a line from a movie. Why would a would-be assassin commit his intent to paper, only to burn it so incompetently? The critics and online sleuths immediately seized upon the inconsistencies. The debate ignited across social media platforms, splitting the audience into warring camps. Some saw the note as chillingly authentic, a glimpse into the mind of a fanatic. Others declared it a clumsy plant, a piece of stagecraft designed to close a case that was beginning to smell of conspiracy. The most damning piece of evidence, and the most modern, emerged from the digital ether. A leak to a major news network claimed that FBI digital forensics experts had pulled a message from a private, encrypted Discord server. The message, allegedly sent from an account tied to Tyler Robinson, was a terse, chilling confession. "It's done. I did it for the country." This painted a picture of a digitally native lone wolf, a young man radicalized in the political echo chambers of the internet, who then moved from keyboard to trigger with deadly resolve. For many, the pieces now clicked into a coherent if horrifying whole. The narrative of Robinson, acting alone, solidified. But the foundational crack from the first day had not healed. It had only deepened, spreading like a web through the entire case. Every new piece of evidence was met not with resolution, but with a fresh wave of intense scrutiny. The entity presenting this evidence was the same one that had already, in its first official communication, misled the nation. A profound question began to haunt the public consciousness. Can we trust the science if we no longer trust the scientists? In the center of this escalating storm stood an unlikely figure of intense scrutiny, FBI Director Kash Patel himself. He had become the key person of interest, not as a suspect in the shooting, but as the architect of the crumbling public confidence. His initial, incorrect announcement was the original sin, but his subsequent behavior became a Rorschach test for the nation's trust. He vanished from public view. There were no follow-up press conferences, no interviews, no attempts to explain the error. Only carefully worded statements, read by stone-faced subordinates, emerged from the J. Edgar Hoover building. To his defenders, this was the posture of a true professional. A leader who had made a grave error in the heat of an unprecedented crisis and was now determined to let the investigation proceed without further unforced errors, to lead quietly and effectively from behind the scenes. They pointed to his long and distinguished career, arguing that a single mistake should not define him or the Bureau. But to a rapidly growing segment of the population, his silence was not calm. It was calculating. It was the cold, composed demeanor of a man with something to hide. Body language experts were paraded on cable news, dissecting the micro-expressions from his initial press conference frame by frame. Was that a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes as he delivered the fateful line? A subtle tightening of the jaw that suggested internal conflict or external pressure? The questions swirling around him became a personal vortex of suspicion. Why did he say a suspect was in custody? Was he simply grossly misinformed by his own field agents in those frantic early hours? Or was he under immense pressure from elsewhere, from the White House, from political operatives, to project an image of control and resolution to a panicking country? Was it a strategic gambit, a deliberate lie to lull the real perpetrators into a false sense of security? Or was it evidence of a deeper, more systemic breakdown? The online discourse reflected this deep division. Supporters rallied behind hashtags praising his integrity and urging patience, arguing that the complex work of justice cannot be conducted in the public Twitter sphere. But the counter-movement grew faster and more virulent, fueled by influential commentators who framed the mistake as the first move in a sophisticated cover-up. The debate was no longer just about Tyler Robinson's guilt. It had metastasized into a trial of the system itself. Director Patel's calm, his retreat into the protocols of his office, had become, for millions, the most suspicious behavior of all. Beyond the digital firestorms and the political intrigue, a raw human tragedy unfolded, largely ignored in the grand theater of national speculation. The Kirk family, along with the families of those injured in the panic, were living a unique form of hell. They were subjected to a torture of 1,000 cuts, each new leak and contradictory headline forcing them to relive the trauma. The initial relief of an arrest was ripped away by the retraction. The horror of the leaked note and the Discord confession dragged them back to the sound of the shot, to the image of their loved one being rushed from the stage. Their grief was compounded by a profound sense of whiplash and betrayal. A family spokesperson released a heartbreaking plea for clarity and an end to the speculation, describing their existence as a nightmare made infinitely worse by the very people who are supposed to be providing us with answers. Their pain was a stark, sobering reminder that at the heart of this maelstrom of doubt and theory were real human beings whose lives had been irrevocably shattered. And so, the collective gaze of a fractured nation turned toward a single date on the calendar, October 30th. Federal prosecutors, acutely aware of the torrent of public distrust, had taken the extraordinary step of promising a complete, transparent disclosure of their evidence in an open preliminary hearing. It was being billed as a day of reckoning, a pivotal test of institutional credibility. The entire country, it seemed, was holding its breath, waiting for the courtroom doors to swing open. What revelations would the 30th bring? Would the prosecutors present the DNA evidence with an unassailable, documented chain of custody that silenced the skeptics? Would the burned note be displayed under glass, its reconstructed text standing up to the brutal cross-examination of the public gaze and a defense attorney's scrutiny? Would the digital forensics behind the Discord message be so technically thorough, so meticulously explained, that they erased all doubt about its authenticity? Or would the presentation in that solemn courtroom raise more questions than it answered? Would the defense team, poised to pick apart every detail, expose flaws in the evidence collection, inconsistencies in the FBI's timeline, or potential contamination of the crime scene? Would the figure of Director Patel loom over the proceedings, his initial misstatement used by the defense to paint the entire investigation as corrupt and unreliable? The promise of October 30th is not merely the promise of facts and evidence. It is a promise of resolution, of a return to a shared reality. But the path to that day is paved with uncertainty. Every leaked document, every anonymous source, every contradictory statement has brought us here, to the edge of a cliff. The American people are now investigators in their own right, jurors in a trial being conducted in the court of public opinion, waiting for the gavel to fall in a court of law. The truth about what happened in Phoenix, the truth about Tyler Robinson, and the truth about the FBI's handling of this crisis all hang in the balance. The story is still being written. The final chapters are yet to be revealed. What is the full story behind the director's premature announcement? What pressures, internal or external, truly shaped the early hours of this investigation? What will the evidence on October 30th ultimately prove, and what will it conceal? The nation waits, watches, and wonders. The unraveling is not over. In many ways, it has just begun. What are they not telling us? What will the next revelation bring? The answers, we are told, are coming. This story is far from over.
Stay tuned.